Hello, and here we go with a case study. It's kind of the ethical dilemma of James and David that Richard has to go through. So the problem in this particular case is brass knuckles on the school grounds. Just to kind of report of exactly what happened. You got your two parties involved. Well, actually, many parties involved, but James is your local tough kid um, that Richard has a relationship with, really been trying to work hard to get him to turn his life around and bring other kids along with him, and that seems to be succeeding. But amidst that, you've also got David. David's an honors student, kind of a trombone enthusiast, and you know of him. Richard knows him, but or doesn't really know him. He knows of him, doesn't actually have a relationship with the young man. So, really, the dilemma is what to do with David. David possessed a weapon. He was in possession with it on school grounds. Uh, then, what happened at that point in time, once brought in for questioning, they found that on him. James confesses he had fully admits to bullying David into holding this weapon for him. And then you've got the police officer is also involved. So they cuff him and stuff him. They're following the letter of the law, and both of them are going to go downtown and be charged with felonies. You've also got the district's disciplinary alternative education plan, which has zero tolerance policy. You're once again kind of the recap. Your frequent flyers, or your frequent flyer is James. He has been in trouble a bunch, knows the drill. Mom says, yeah, keep him there, keep him in jail. Don't even worry about it. Maybe he'll learn something this time. And you go ahead, knowing that he was at fault, and file the papers to expel him. You've got David. He's your noob. He doesn't know anything about this particular type of life. David is, unprepared for what he's about to go through. And you are generally concerned with what this might do to him. Of course, his mother is also very mad and upset about the situation, but, is concerned and well involved. You do not file papers automatically. As a matter of fact, you tear them up. So the true dilemma and the one sentence to put on there: what is more important, policy or justice? That is the way I see it. That is what I think we are talking about here. So let's go through the facts of the case. The people involved: you got David Ramos, 13-year-old male, honors student, kind of a band kid of unknown race who possesses a weapon, the weapon in question. James, 15-year-old, also of unknown race, has a troubled past, kind of a laundry list of things that he's been involved with. And he claims that he threatened David and basically forced him to hold on to the weapon in question. The incident happened, where has it happened at? Happened on school grounds. Both the students had been arrested. Your school has a no tolerance policy about those weapons and require a 45-day suspension. Richard filed suspension papers on James, but not on David. Okay, so let's go through this, review this timeline. Richard calls James into the office because he had been tardy. Third one this week. Come on into the office. Minutes later, James' fifth-hour teacher witnesses him giving something to another student, assumes it's drugs. Richard calls kind of the police officer to escort David to the office, and then James actually arrives in the office first, followed immediately by the police officer and David. So at that point, you're in the office. Students are questioned, and the officer searches David, finding these brass knuckles, throws the handcuffs on David for felony weapons possession. James then claims, "Hey, I threatened him. To quote, I told him I was going to kick his ass if he did not hold these for me, so then I could take care of my business later on." The officer takes both the students to jail, charging them with felony weapons possession. Richard then calls the students' parents. At that point, fills out paperwork on James, thinks about it when it comes to David, and then just tears it up. So David is back in class a week later, and James gets a call from the district director, the DAEP, and basically he is told, you will follow the policy and suspend David. And if Richard refuses to file that paperwork, he's going to be written up, and that will go on to his permanent record. So let's review the stakeholders here. You've got your assistant principal, that's Richard. You've got the two students involved, James and David. And the other stakeholders, you got the school board, and then the DAEP. You got the parents involved, which seems like mom on both of these. Also the police officer, and that's going to be kind of interconnected here. And those are kind of the major stakeholders that are involved in this situation. So what is what are your options? What could he do? Well, if you don't file the expulsion papers on David, Richard's going to get written up, and a reprimand will go into his permanent file. That was made abundantly clear by the director. And then the consequence of that is David will remain in school. So that is kind of what happened initially, but he'll be able to stay in school. 2, you file the expulsion papers on David. David's going to be suspended, and Richard will not be reprimanded at that point. File the papers, take your concerns to the school board. That's another way you could do it. Or don't file the papers and take your concerns about their policy to the school board. So what I went through, and after thinking about it and going through the possible scenarios of this, I decided I would not file the papers on David, and I would take my case to the school board, because it is the no tolerance policy that is really kind of the issue here. So being a policy matter, I would get a hold of the secretary and request to be put on the agenda at the next school board meeting, and then try to follow the school board, kind of the handbook, as far as the procedures of how to do that. I would also talk to all the stakeholders before you actually make that decision, kind of get a feeling of where you're talking about, and then garner support where possible. And yes, I do realize I am going to get written up. If that is what I decide to do, I am going to get written up. But in my opinion, you cannot put a price on being able to live with yourself and to try to do the right thing. I would choose justice over policy in this particular case. So reprimand's going to go on my permanent record, and with the board involved, the danger is they're like, wow, this is a mess. I don't want to deal with it, and you could be fired. So in my case, all right, I'll go back to selling stuff, make more money anyway. But David would then remain in school. And you know what? The school board can overrule me at that point and say, you know what? We're filing the papers anyway. We're going to suspend or expel David. They could also, by taking this to the board, I believe that you could kind of change policy to a little bit more of a common sense approach. I know in my particular school, when you come across situations like this, it is a case-by-case basis. It is not going to be, we're going to brush it with one brush and just do everything the same. It is a case-by-case basis. Looking into this quite a bit further, there are some legal cases that have been tried against zero tolerance policies. Normally, these cases are not successful. So the law is probably not on my side. I researched, and I believe it's Seal versus Morgan, which was a circuit court back in Sixth Circuit Court back in 2000. The suspensions were upheld most of the time, and the student, even when the student didn't knowingly possess a weapon, like they didn't have any idea it was there, they still said, doesn't matter if you didn't know, you're suspended. I think a lot of this comes from the very lawsuit happy culture that we have, and I think it is really kind of too bad. I believe that common sense should be a little bit more common than it is today. But that is where we're at. I think that is kind of the conclusion of what my thought process was. This was an interesting case study, and one that, looking through this, I never plan on being a school administrator or a leader that would have to make this type of a decision. But if I were, having gone through it, I would hope that I would make the decision to be just over policy. Thank you very much, and let me see if I can pause this deal.